Hello and welcome to For Fox's Sake. My name is Pete Selby. Alongside me is Tom. Tom, you've drawn the short straw. You've got the fantastic pod after the game against Wrexham, and we'll touch on what happened against Coventry as well. So first of all, very good evening to everybody watching live. If you are, do get in contact. We are live. You can contact us via Facebook, via YouTube, via X, however you're watching this broadcast. Do get in contact. Tell us what you think. Comment on what we're saying. Tell us what you think about the performance, what we can do going forward. Is it Leicester on the brink? Is it Cifuentes on the brink, etc.? Whatever you want to say, do comment. And first plug really for fox8.news. You all know by now. Head to fox8.news and you'll see plenty of in-depth, comprehensive coverage from myself, from Rob Hayes, and from especially Andy Moore on for fox8.news. Loads and loads of stuff there. There's plenty coming through, and there's going to be loads in the next couple of weeks. Some really exciting stuff, which of course I can't say, but make sure you head to for fox8.news, find it all there, and of course subscription to for fox8.news. It's only a £5 a month. It's the price of a pint, and guess what that does? It allows us to make this podcast completely free. This podcast, also the preview podcast, and anything else in the world of podcasts that you hopefully enjoy listening or watching to from For Fox's Sake. That's all free because of what we can do on the website. And there's loads of content on the website. I'm thoroughly enjoying going through the top 100 Leicester City players. And we've got the latest group from 84 to 80 coming through. Bit of an 80s feel. And there may be a Premier League winner there as well. But I'm not going to give it away. You have to go to for fox8.news. Tom, right, let's get into it. Okay. It's almost that we've reached a different level. They all come out at different levels, don't they? In terms of really good performances and really poor performances, okay? And I think we reached a new low yesterday, even though we didn't lose the game. And when you say a new low, you've got to look back on what happened against Southampton, what happened against QPR, what happened against Sheffield United. But this just seemed completely different in a way that they just never got into the game, and Wrexham I thought were very, very average as well. It's very damning, very disappointing. We'll go into the detail as well, and I think also it kind of summed up what's happened this season completely. But what are your thoughts immediately just regarding the game against Wrexham?
It's supremely frustrating. It's quite nice to know that as a fan base, we're all on the same page, more or less, with this. I think we're all, even people that are still perhaps justifying for different reasons why Marty's a good choice moving forward for us. I'm not one of those people, for the record. But at least we're all appreciative of the fact that things right now are just not working in the direction that we need them to. Your word "damning" there is adequate and is a great word to be able to sum up the performance and where we are as a club right now. I think the reason why Wrexham is so frustrating and such a poor performance, and Coventry as well, but I think Wrexham in particular, when you're up against former players like Matty James and you're just seeing the drop off, it shines a light on just how far we've fallen so rapidly. Everything about the performances, to the communication to the club, to the management, to not even being able to get in a technical director, and just all of it right now feels like the club from top to bottom is just not thinking in a combined manner. And it is deeply, deeply frustrating for all of us. And certainly throw me in with that lot.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? It's so frustrating. The reason I said it kind of came, or it's come to a bit of a kind of a not an end. I mean, that might be happening at the weekend. Let's get that right. But we're going to come on to that. We've got the preview to come in a couple of days' time with Rob Hayes, and that's where we're going to be looking forward to the game against Oxford. And I've said a couple of times on for Fox's Sake this season that I think Cifuentes is on the brink, and I completely think he's on the brink right now. First, for two reasons. Obviously, the performances, but I think when you look at what we've got coming up against Oxford, against Charlton, etc. 2 games at home, which you're expecting a performance first of all, okay, just a performance. The results is important, and it will be as we go through the season, and as we possibly will be fighting a relegation dogfight if we have the points taken off us. But look at yesterday. We got the points, which overall you say get a draw away from home and win the home matches. That's how you get through a league season. But the draw didn't matter. The point didn't matter. The late Vestergaard equaliser didn't matter because the entire performance was completely dreadful, lacking in so many areas, including desire, heart, efforts, fight, certainly, especially the goal. And it kind of summed up the whole club at the moment, even though we got the point. So it's quite strange. You're talking about an away draw against a very informed side. We'll go into a few details, and also I think it kind of summed up the season. There's plenty of, because it was on Sky, plenty of stats. We'll just go through a few stats that were signposted on the broadcast. First of all, regarding the actual broadcast, Andy, watching Chichitu Bang Bang tonight, wish I'd watched it last night instead of City. Yeah, I'm actually not a fan of the film. I'm not a fan of the film. And Richard Houston says one person to blame, it's Top. He hands off everything, gives a go ahead, KP out. So yeah, it's coming to a hilt, and we'll get to that shortly. But conceded 40 goals. Okay, so it's 21st in the league. So, and then when you've got Sheffield Wednesday, it's going to be out of 23, really. Clean sheets, 3. We haven't got to clean sheet in, 22 in the league now. So that's the worst record, 21st worst record in the league. Errors leading to goals, 7, 21st in the league. And errors leading to shots, 22, which is bottom. So that's worse than Sheffield Wednesday. We know about the clean sheet record, which is quite frankly appalling. And we're 6 points off the playoffs, we know, but we're now looking back and we're 9 points taken off us. We are slap bang just above the relegation zone. We've got the least amount of points that we've had in a season since the 07-08 relegation season, 38 from 28. That was relegation to League One. So it's not looking good. Just overall as a whole, though, Tom, what I mentioned about Cifuentes, and again, I'm going to say it again, if we do lose at the weekend, he could be on the brink, but we're at time of recording. This is the 21st of January. Nothing's happened in the transfer window. There are rumours, and if certain moves for strikers from Scandinavian countries happen, I know for a fact that Mr. Andy Moore's got some very, very good links, and some journalists over in Sweden, etc., have spoken to Fox 8, and for Fox 8, and of course they will be on for Fox8.news if and when any moves do happen for more in-depth information about certain strikers. But we won't kind of go into that because we just don't know. Assigning a player seems to be completely alien to Leicester City. But if we do get to the end of January and nothing really happens in the transfer window, and we've lost James in midfield for an amount of time, we know we've got one loan possibly coming in anyway because of Carranza going. Surely someone like Cifuentes, I don't think he's going to walk, but he could just turn around and go, I'm not being given anything from above. I'm given no help, no new players, and I'm being on the brink anyway. And I think it all might possibly implode after January.
Yeah, I agree. Marty hasn't been backed. So what do we do? Thing is, would you back Marty? I mean, is he really filling us with confidence with his team selections and his tactics and just some of the bizarre substitutions? We've seen what Norwich have just done. They've just changed their manager and they've had a bounce, and maybe that's for us. You look at those stats and all I see is the 2 at the start of every single one of them. We're in the 20s. I think it's the same with our running stats as well. This screams to me of a side that's not fit. I don't think we're well organised. We're defensively poor. We're certainly not drilled in that regard. Granted, we're light. We don't necessarily have the resources and the players available to us to be able to do things, but Top's not backing us up in that regard either. So, but then are we hamstrung with FFP? You know, like reporting's come out again recently that we're in a position that perhaps we've breached again. And you just sit here and you think, how? Like, obviously, it's an Oliver Skip and an Ayu's worth of transfer fees. But that just again leads to greater frustration, because you're thinking that the people in charge at the top of this football club are making financial decisions whilst knowing that they're already making bad decisions. We're just repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And it's, you don't want to come on a podcast and be all doom and gloom, because sometimes it's easy to do that. I feel, to be able to come on here and just rant and whatnot, but it is getting to the point where you want to be a bit positive, but it's hard to see where the change is going to come from in that regard. If nothing changes, nothing will change, and we need fresh bodies in the door. I'm concerned massively about James. He's the shining light of this season. If anyone can drag us from our current position into safety, it's going to be him. And I think he scored and assisted in the 5 previous matches to Wrexham. So obviously he's pivotal for us. Without him, if this is a longer term injury, and I haven't seen anything yet, Pete, all I saw was that he pulled up during the match. That's terrible for us. There's just no way around it. We need a manager, in my opinion, that can look towards playing the youth and trying to dig out a formation or the bright sparks and put them on the pitch. To me, Louis Page is a bright spark. I think we instantly look better with him on the field. But we need somebody at managing this club that recognizes those moments and recognizes that perhaps that's something that we can try that's a little bit different. And I'm just not seeing that right now. I think this is the thing that made Wrexham so frustrating, was because it shined a massive spotlight on all these inadequacies from just top to bottom, and just how light we are in all respects. So a really frustrating game.
I think so, and also the squad is looking rather thin now. With hopefully James not out for long, looks like a hamstring injury. We will see what happens. Whether no news is good news or bad news, we'll just have to wait and see on that front. The back line looking a little bit threadbare at the moment. All 3 centre halves are starting at the moment, because we've got a lack of a left back, because Thomas has now been taken out to the side, which I think we all agree with, after, again, another horror show, but this time against Coventry. And then Nelson can come in and play left back. I'm not too sure about that. I agree with maybe the role of Nelson against Wrexham, because you've got somewhere like they're a big side, aren't they? Roof up front. It's makes sense to have that extra height and physical presence. But when you then look on the other side and you got Hamza Chowdhury, and I know there was injuries and it all kind of switched around slightly, which I don't agree with how it happened. But surely you've got, I mean, Ricardo, first of all, was terrible for the goal. He really has got beaten in a, and it doesn't matter about age. It doesn't matter about pace that he doesn't have anymore. It was just pure positioning and almost concentration, really. The man went past him and the ball was passed him, and he hasn't reacted whatsoever. And then he's scrambling to get back, and then it's a mess sort of Coley's slight touch. The goalkeeper didn't cover himself in all sorts of glory. And it was just a really poor goal. But surely there could be an option of maybe having Ricardo at left back, and then you can play Chowdhury maybe at right back, etc. But what it does show is that the squad is very, very thin, and we might have centre halves coming back to fitness. But at the moment, playing all 3, whether that's a good thing or not, we'll wait and see. Coley, I don't think he had a good game, and Richard thinks as well. I'm convinced that Coley's not a footballer. He's so poor on the ball, and his strength is his strength, but he gets knocked over all the time. And yeah, I thought he was quite poor, and Page to start the next game with Aluko. And then, of course, you looked at the midfield, and if you go to forfox8.news, you can read my column on Jordan James and the impact that he's made at Leicester. Leicester's shining lights, borrowed shining lights. But that light has gone out now, because he's probably going to be out the side for minimum, let's say, a couple of weeks at best, maybe even more. We'll wait and see. So what then happens with the squad, with the midfield? Does Page then come in for James in the midfield? Skip and Page, whether we're going to go down that route, not sure. But what this means is that Martí Cifuentes will have to be a football manager. He will have to manage his side. He'll have to pick the team that he thinks can best beat Oxford on Saturday. And he'll have to pick a side that maybe doesn't play his very, very rigid formation. Rigid not in terms of players not being able to move from their positions, but the fact that he always turfs out that same 4-2-3-1 formation, maybe it will force his hand into actually trying something new. I mentioned those three centre halves. Maybe those three centre halves could play together in a back three, etc., and maybe give the extra player in midfield into the centre of midfield in a 3-5-2. Because you don't have James, you can maybe play Page and then maybe bring another player in as well, just to maybe solidify that. If you want to maybe move Hamza in there, for example, that could possibly work, or maybe even Ricardo. There's plenty of options still, but the one thing I've said all along with Cifuentes, and I know that you're not a fan, is that I'm not saying he's a safe pair of hands, but what I said is when or if Leicester, and it's looking like a when, we get dragged into a relegation dogfight, at least we've not pressed the big red button, which is Andy King being a manager of Leicester City and taking over a side, and we have no idea whether that's a good appointment and we have an instant uplift like happened at Southampton, although that's gone backwards now, or it's a complete disaster and then we're scrambling around for someone who can try and keep us up. I think having that manager, even though it hasn't worked properly at all this season, I know that, but I'd rather him in charge for now, just in case we do get that 9 points, and then we can maybe press the big red button later. But I'm starting to really change now, because I think at the end of this transfer window, regardless, I just don't think that we're going to bring in players for him. I don't think he's going to make any decision on that. I don't think any player that we bring in, maybe we're bringing this guy from Sweden. If that's the case, I don't think it's Marty Cifuentes who's done that. It'll be our scouting team, etc. So I don't really think it matters. The big question with him is he the guy in the summer for the rebuild? And if they still think that, then keep him. If not, I'm now in the position where I think it needs to change. And I think a City side without Cifuentes, I just don't think it will make a lot of difference.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point. I mean, for me, it comes back to the academy. Is the integration of the academy, which at the start of the season, Marty seemed reluctant to do. Are we doing it because his hand has been forced progressively more and more throughout the actual season? And is it the case that more kids are going to get more opportunities now that obviously James is out and we're having issues at left back and at the fullback position in general? If this was a manager who from the off had a plan and was showing that this was going to be the key focus of an actual rebuild, because I think a lot of us were prepared to write this season off and say, this is a rebuild season. Let's focus on the academy. Let's sell the players that we can turn for a profit. Anyone that we can get off the books to be able to shift them on, let's do it just to survive. But it's starting to feel like if we're not going to survive and we're not necessarily going to focus on a rebuild to the full extent that we should, is Marty still the person to take us forward in that position? Look, I've not been Marty out the whole time. I've wavered on this. I'll put my hand up and admit that from the start. But I think I'm in a position now where I just don't necessarily see the benefit and the strategy to move forward with him. Is he a safe pair of hands? This is the thing about Wrexham, is for me, it's we're averaging a win, a draw, and then a loss, a win, a draw, and then a loss. And it's kind of just the whole signs of a mid-table manager for me. And if we're in a position where we're starting to stare down the barrel of a relegation with a points deduction, I just see the confidence draining out of this side. There was a moment during Wrexham where I noticed that Bobby De Cordova-Reid was having a go at Mavididi twice in a row with his positioning. And I think it was to do with the press. And it seems to me that there is a general sense of confusion perhaps amongst the actual players as to what position they should be in when, and what the actual plan is in terms of press, counter-press, movement, that kind of thing. And I just think that this far into a season, that's not really good enough. At least that's how I read that situation. It's interesting to me that you picked out Ricardo's positioning for the goal. Maybe it's the same thing. I'm just not convinced that this structural integrity of this unit and Marty's overseeing of that is solid, if that makes sense. And that's my concern, is that if we continue to give this person more time, are we going to get the benefits? I'm just not convinced, Pete. But I'm open if you want to convince me and other people in the chat, for sure.
No, well, that's my point. My point is kind of what you said. We win, we draw, and we lose. And my theory about Cifuentes is if all of a sudden tomorrow we get 9 points taken off us, or maybe next month, let's say, and we are then level on points with whoever is just inside the relegation zone, Portsmouth, for example, that's a record of winning and then losing and drawing. That might well be good enough to stay up. That's my position. What I think is if we do sack Cifuentes now, and then Andy King comes in and temporarily takes over, we've seen in the past that not work at all at Leicester and elsewhere. And then you're going to have to try and bring someone in. And if you do, and we have 9 points taken off us, then we bring in someone in to try and avoid relegation. And I just think having Cifuentes in charge, we're in 22nd place, we're in 21st place, got the chance to maybe slightly pull clear with that record that we've got at the moment, even though it's not great, don't get me wrong, but I think that's a better position to be in, because then if it starts to really go wrong after that, then you can make the change, okay? But making the change first, I think, could be quite dangerous. But the problem is, I'm arguing against myself, because now I've turned around and gone, because there's no fight in the side, that's what you want to see. It's all very well Fataru scoring from 70 yards. It's all very well having great goals, performances, mainly at home, and also the first half at Coventry, which was excellent. There are obviously talented players in this side, and on occasion, that's going to come to the fore, isn't it? That's what happened against Coventry. That's what happens in Sparks with the likes of Fataru and James, etc. But when it comes to a relegation dogfight, that's when you need the word fight. And that is literally what we do not have in this side. A wet, cold, windy, rainy night at Wrexham against a physical side who are in good form, who all of a sudden have a recent Premier League champion turn up in a league game. This is a massive occasion for them. And it's just the sort of game that Marty Cifuentes' Leicester City would not turn up for, because you need to fight. You need to have full effort from every single player. Doesn't matter whether they're Ricardo, who's won an FA Cup. Doesn't matter whether they're a James or a Skip who's been signed for 25 million, or Ayew who's played in the Premier League all his career. It doesn't really matter, because you need to fight first. And then once you're in a position to then show your skills, great, then you can go and do it. But the problem is we didn't have that. We didn't have that first thing. And if we were in a relegation fight, well, that's when it all changes, because I don't think the players like Fataru, etc., I don't think having those showboat moments, which of course we all enjoy and we all love, and they can do, I don't think that's what's needed in a relegation dogfight. And the problem is, and this is again a problem which we always will mention on every single podcast, a little bit of a rant now, every single podcast, we do not know how many points are going to be taken off Leicester. We're saying 9 points. Everyone's saying 9 points, and we're just on the edge of the relegation zone. I think after these next two games, or after Oxford, I'm going to make a new rule for fuck's sake. I think that we need to come up with an amount of points that Leicester are going to have taken off them. We're going to need to all agree, and I think 9 is probably the way forward. And I think we need to rewrite the league table from the Oxford game onwards, because I'm quite confident that at home we can do something against Oxford with a younger side. Listen out for the preview in the next couple of days with Rob Hayes. I think we're going to put out a younger side, and I think they will perform against Oxford at home. But I think we need to start looking at the league table and not saying we're 6 points off the playoffs. I think we need to take 9 points off us and be a bit more realistic and go, right, we are in a relegation fight now, because it's all very well in all the months before now saying there's a possibility of points being taken off us. But I think right now, because the FA, for whatever reason, it's dragging their heels, no idea. It should have been sorted a long time ago. It should have been sorted before the ball was kicked first day of the season. But because it hasn't, I think we, as Leicester City fans, need to get realistic now and go, we are in a relegation dogfight. Take off 9 points after the game against Oxford. We need to create a new league table.
I completely agree. I mean, I am the fun sponge, and I remember after back-to-back wins at one point, I did drop that on the top of it just at the end of the show. But no, I completely agree, Pete. Just out of interest, in terms of your calculation with Marty, if the club backs him during the summer for a rebuild, does that change? Do you feel more confident with Marty in charge at that point? Because what I'm wondering is if they don't, and he's not getting a tune out of, or let's say fight out of this current group of players, what does that mean about him in our position? Does that change your thinking at all?
No, I actually it doesn't. Strangely, I think for one reason, because I think the players who will be there to form the basis of a squad next season, you could go through it now. The goalkeeper more than likely will be there. And when it comes to centre half, someone like Nelson will be there. You would have Jordan James, fingers crossed, sign on the dotted line, and a Leicester City player. You would have Skip, players who I wouldn't say ever excelled under Cifuentes, but have improved. Skip, there's no point in saying that he hasn't, because he has, hasn't he? Jordan James has been a very good player this season. Nelson's now in the side and playing reasonably well, and will be there. The wingers, Mavadidi's playing a lot better than he did at the start of the season. So the players that he's fell out with, or players that he's rightly fell out with, and again, my column on Fox8.news about Marty Cifuentes, his first 6 months, 6 months of holding on, I've called it. I mentioned the fact that Winks and Walt Vass is obviously gone now. Two players who are fundamentally very unpopular with Leicester City fans, and everyone's gone, okay, that's fine. You know, you can fall out with Winks. He's fell out with Ruud van Nistelrooy before. That's no problem. So what I'm saying is that the players who are going to form the basis of the squad in the first team from the current first team, and there's not going to be many, it seems that he's got quite a good relationship with, and they're playing well. All the rest more than likely will leave. I think there's 16 players who are either 1 year away or will be out of contract in the summer. So there's going to be a huge turnaround. So if you get rid of all these players who are out of contract, and many who have probably got a year left may go as well, and there's a complete refresh, and Marty Cifuentes brings in his players, okay, and that's the key thing. You've got a team and a squad full of his players, so surely they will get along with Cifuentes. And then you've got a team who remain of players who have played quite well this season and have improved, maybe, for having Marty Cifuentes select them in the side. Then I can see them forming the basis of a decent side. That's all in theory. That's all in theory. But the people at the top of the football club, they need to be sure that Cifuentes is the man to trust to bring in the players that he wants, crucially, and that he can form a new Leicester side to then move up the table next year. Fingers crossed we're in the Championship. If they think that he is not the manager at all to do that, if they've lost faith in Cifuentes and they're just keeping him in as a manager because they've got no real option, and also they haven't got a director of football or a technical director who may want to change Cifuentes and bring in his own man, then that he's just treading water as a manager at the moment, which I think that's the case. And if they don't believe he's the guy, they need to make the decision, and they need to make the decision reasonably soon as well. Whether they're just going to wait for the end of the season, and whether they think it's roughly the same as me, where if we get points taken off us, would rather have a manager in charge, and then we've got more options to make changes, etc., rather than sack him first. We will see. But what do you reckon with that theory?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing: is the director of football seems crucial to this conversation, doesn't it? Because they could come in and just change everything. And I think this probably gets back to where we started this conversation, which is that there's so many question marks over so many different aspects of the football club at the moment that it can feel quite dejecting as a fan, I think, for a lot of us. I certainly imagine to be in the mix as a player, it would probably have the same effect. The point about Wrexham is a great one. I mean, it was a horrible night to be playing football in North Wales. So that's totally fair. This side is just so Jekyll and Hyde in terms of the first half with Cov. And I remember that, like, the group chat was lighting up after that performance, right? Like, all of us were chatting there just saying, this is the best performance of the season. And then obviously to come out the second half, throw it away, and then Wrexham. I don't know what side we're looking at here. Is it the first half against Cov, or is it the rest that we're seeing? Because if it's the first half against Cov, I'm willing to stick with it, and I think Marty could get a tune out of them. But to me, it just doesn't seem to be the majority of the time. I guess we'll just have to see. We'll just have to see how it all pans out.
When we played Coventry, the first half was really good, and it reminded me in parts of when we played Derby, similar ground, etc., wasn't it? But it's very frustrating. Can't afford Marty to take us forward. The fans have no confidence in the bloke, says Tony. Will we ever get a technical director? Well, exactly, and that's the problem. with Cifuentes is the fact that if someone comes in and they might want their own manager, etc., we'll have to wait and see. Again, the club is kind of frozen. That's what I used in my article about Marty Cifuentes, 6 months of holding on for Fox8.news. Head there and you can read it right now. That the club is frozen at the moment. We're frozen because we don't know what points are going to take in offers. We're frozen because we can't buy anyone, and we're frozen because we're in mid-table. We've got half a team, and also we've got a squad of players who are either going to leave in this transfer window at the end of it or in the summer. So we just don't know going forward. But when I look at the actual performance, let's talk a little bit about the football. When I was saying about the side and about Fatawu, Mavididi, James in midfield, when they get going, they can play. And it doesn't really matter because they're good players. It doesn't really matter who we're playing against. We're playing against a top side like Coventry, full of confidence, great atmosphere, etc. Local derby, bang. First half, absolutely fantastic. Bobby De Cordova-Reid pulling the strings as well. It can work. It really can. That's why I'm quite confident against Oxford on the weekend. Okay, especially and then but when you're in the conditions that it was down at Wrexham, and I'm not giving any excuses. Please don't think that I'm giving excuses for the players because it was windy and rainy. It's just that when it is windy and rainy against a very physical Wrexham side, you need to battle and you need to fight, because if you don't do that, then you won't be able to then show off your own skills. And that was the problem against Wrexham. And that's been the problem all season. When we concede a goal, heads go down and we can just completely blow up as a side. And that's our problem. And that's Marty Cifuentes' problem. And the problem that we've got as fans is that there is no confidence in this manager installing that in his side. That's why we were saying the sort of players that we need to sign are hardened championship players who will bring that with them, because the manager's not going to install it. You look at a manager like a Martin O'Neill. The first thing he's done up at Celtic, he's got them actually running and got them fighting. And then, of course, they're the best side in the country and they can show off their skills, etc., in places. And the star players are given the ball more often in those places. But it's the fundamental thing. Players will run through a brick wall for him. They're not going to run through a brick wall for Marty Cifuentes at all, whatsoever. Not saying they don't like the bloke. And I don't think he's lost the confidence of the dressing room whatsoever. It's just that you need to have that fight in the Championship. That's why managers can come up to the Championship from lower league and do quite well, because they just have that on their side. Maybe when it gets to more technical things, etc., then they kind of fall over. Maybe it needs some players coming in to install that rather than Cifuentes. Problem is, we can't sign anyone, can we?
No, we seem stuck. Yeah, Marty certainly seems very technically orientated to me. And he says all the right things. When you listen to him in the press, he speaks well and he says a lot of things without actually probably saying much at all, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And he seems quite the diplomat, which in terms
I've heard
of managing,
that before somewhere. Like.
A bit like how our podcast, I guess. But he is very technically minded. And what I think gives me the greatest concern is that there is a certain stubbornness around approach of play that I think we find quite frustrating. I mean, Stolarczyk against Wrexham, some of those short passes, I'm not really sure what they were actually achieving. I understand that you want to draw players and draw out the press and then obviously 1-2 around them and progress the ball up quickly. But even when we did that, a lot of the time we would get the ball up the pitch only to kind of stop and then recycle possession and take the easy pass, the sideways pass. And you're just looking at like your Hamza Chowdhury's and obviously once he was moved into midfield, just be a little bit braver. Just have that confidence to be able to just push the ball forward and take that risky pass. I remember when we used to have Tielemans, and we always used to slate him from time to time about, not necessarily getting the pass correct and having it intercepted by the opposition, but everyone would always give him a pat on the back and say, well, at least, mate, he's having a go. He's trying it. He's going for the pass to be able to find the gap, to be able to create the opportunity. And I think we're so devoid of actual creativity in the park, because it does feel like players aren't necessarily fighting. They aren't necessarily taking the risks to be able to create the opportunities, at least to my mind, that I'm finding it deeply frustrating. But absolutely, that's why we need bodies.
Absolutely. How does the booing at the end of the match affect young kids long term, like Monger and Page, etc.? Yeah, I get it. I get it, Push Tech, but my first thought would be if you've gone and watched that live, you've got absolutely every right to boo that performance. Also, a lot was made about the celebration or lack of it from Vestergaard's goal. Quite well taken goal, actually. But there was no real celebration. Mavadidi had his arms in the air. And what can we read into that? First of all, when I saw that straight away, my reading was it was nothing to do with they're not together or anything like that, or that it was the fact that they understood that they've played really poorly. And these players who have played at a lot higher level against better opposition and expect higher standards from themselves. And you could see that when they were walking off. It looked to me like a group of players who knew that they've underperformed, who were angry, realized that they're actually against the side, who, not saying that they should have won, but they realized at the end of the game, look, we've had a good chance. We should have beat these. We're a lot better than this. And it just hasn't worked today. And it hasn't worked for many occasions. And that's what I got from that. And that's what I got from Jannik Vestergaard. It wasn't, I've had to do this. No one else can put the ball in the back of the net. It was a dejected, yes, I've scored. We've got the point, but we should have beat these. And unfortunately, it's down to them, isn't it? And it's down to them to try and turn this around. And when you look at the substitutions, a lot of people were saying about Boubacar, and well, just to mention about the effect it will have on the younger players. Yes, of course it will, but because they're not probably quite in the firing line, and I'm pretty sure they'll be aware of that themselves. I'm sure that they would have been possibly affected if it got quite personal towards the likes of Walt Vass and maybe Harry Winks if they were in the side. But I think it's now just an overwhelming kind of ill feeling towards the club, towards the ownership, towards the manager, etc., and also the players as a whole, but maybe not individually towards them. I think they'll be aware of that, especially when they play at home, and hopefully they'll be given starts against Oxford. But again, we'll come on to that. So I don't think it's a problem. The problem I would have is if we do get sucked into a relegation fight and all of a sudden you're playing 3 or 4 17-year-olds to say, try and keep us up in this league. That's quite tough. I think that's a bit of an issue, but we might come on to that later on this season. Samare on the bench. Why didn't he come on? Obviously, Thomas, we know why as well. Daka as well. Why didn't he come on? This time of year, 21st of January. Am I, I'm not a flat earther or anything like that, Tom, but am I going down a conspiracy theory route saying that Samari didn't come on because they don't want him to get injured because he's maybe going to be on his way, and there's been rumours about Daka possibly going as well? I can't see any reason why Daka didn't play, apart from the fact that they maybe don't want to get him injured because we're looking at maybe getting a few quid for him, which can be used elsewhere. Does that sound about right? Because I can't understand why they didn't come on. Can you?
I just don't know who would buy Daka. That's the thing.
Oh yeah,
that's the only. To be honest, I hadn't actually thought of that because I don't think he's performed at a level that people would be seriously interested. Monaco and Samare, they seem to be linked quite often every window, or at least there's some interest that's registered from Monaco and other Italian clubs, but nothing ever obviously has materialized, and I'm a little bit skeptical of that as well. But he is an asset. He's probably one of the bigger assets that are sellable at the football club right now. So certainly it's an option. I mean, there's just been such strange substitutions in the past that I'm not. This is the thing, is we are left in this grey space where we are guessing. And Marty has shown a real predilection to trust the old guard over other options, frustratingly so at times. I'm not fully ready to dive in on the conspiracy theory just yet. I hope you're right. I hope we can move some players on and open up some space. But I really don't know. I really don't know why Daka, especially after scoring, right? He seems to have just been dropped again. So
that's what I can't understand. Final points. I've got a big circle down around Ricardo. Okay, Ricardo Pereira. What a great player. Okay, what a great player. You can see on the bottom of the screen for Fox8.news, the top 100 players. What we've done Okay, what we've done is we have formed a list of the 100 greatest players to play for Leicester City. Okay, and we're going through them 5 at a time on for fox8.news. Again, subscription is £5 a month. And what that brings you is you can go on fox8.news right now and see what's on there. There's loads coming through. There's loads. It's been live since the 1st of January, and you can have a browse of all the articles, all the features, in-depth coverage of Leicester City women as well. Some brilliant interviews on there. Hopefully enjoying the women's football show with Lily Saunders, the podcast that's out. Loads of great articles on there. 5 things to look out for each game. 5 things that we've learned as well. There's loads and loads of stuff on there. So head over to fox8.news. And again, £5 a month, that's what it costs. But of course, what that does, it provides us with the ability to make these podcasts and make them free as well. So for you to enjoy. But just talking about the 100, we formed the list, okay, and it's taken a lot of head scratching, and I'm basically going from job to job. So I'll be commentating on the horse racing or doing some greyhounds or whatever I'm doing at the time, or maybe football, whilst looking at a list of these 100 players from about 140 and trying to sort them out. And I've been moving players up and down this list all over the place, and we've got parameters set for why players are at certain points, whether they've won anything, how long they stayed at the football club. Again, head to for fox8.news, you can find it all on there. And Ricardo Pereira is the one player who currently plays for Leicester City who is in the conversation. I'm not going to say whether he's in there or not. And it's a real shame to see such a great player in his time for Leicester, obviously hampered by injuries, etc., but be done like he was for the goal. Okay. And we've spoken already tonight about what happened and about the fact that it was very poor from him. I think his time at the football club is over. I think in the summer, I believe he's out of contract. I think he's on the list of out of contract players. And I think it will be time for him to probably move on. I don't think there'll be any use of Ricardo Pereira after this season. I had a message from a good friend of mine who basically said about him, saying they should take the captaincy off him. Maybe that could be a good option. Who would you give it to? That could be another option. Maybe someone like a Nelson. Who knows? Maybe someone like him, and then possibly that could not rejuvenate, but give a big lift to the young players to say, look, here's your captain, someone you all know very well, someone who's just a little bit older than you, and this is the way, this is the route we're going down. Okay, and look what you can be. You can be a captain, etc. This is your club. This is your team now. The old brigade have had their time. Okay, it's down to you guys. So that could easily be an option. And this was mentioned by my mate Matt. But with Ricardo, I think the only time to play him, and I would play him, and I would play him on Saturday. I don't think playing him twice in 2 games is a good idea. He needs a break, so maybe he can't play on Saturday. But I think his time at fullback is over. Okay, and in a strange way, I've been championing Chowdhury to be playing in midfield because I think we need a bit of bite, and I think that's where he should play if we can on Saturday. But I think Ricardo Pereira's time at fullback is over. I think he needs to play in midfield. We've seen him play very poorly on the odd occasion. I'm trying to remember back to the home game where he was dreadful for whatever reason in the first half. He just completely off the ball. But then when you see him in midfield, he still has that skill. He still has the vision. He can pass the ball quickly, etc. And I think he's still an asset in midfield for Leicester. And especially if we're going to play 3 in midfield. But I think his time at fullback is over. What do you reckon about Pereira? Unfortunately.
I think Ricardo has been a fantastic servant to this football club. I think he is a huge, how can I say this? I think his quality speaks for itself. And I think at the top of his game, he could have slotted into any of the top 3 sides in the Premier League. I think he was that good. I'm not saying that he would have been better than everyone else in the world, but I think he was just absolutely fantastic and realistically probably above our level. I think if we could have sold him, we probably should have. And I think we would have done really well on that. But I'm not sad that he's here. I like what he brings in terms of his ethic and who he is as a person to the football club. But I completely agree. I think it's sad to say, I think he is exposed in the right back position at the minute. We've seen under Enzo Maresca, his technical ability in the middle of the park, and I think it's a great shout. His passing range, his vision, it's fantastic. And he is going to be the kind of person that actually gets us up the pitch quickly. I think that's something that's really lacking for us at the moment, is those quick, fast passes to be able to just progress the ball quickly, not ponder on it and just get it up. And so for me, I think it's a great option. I mean, we've done it before, we've seen it work. Why not give it a go?
Yeah, again, writing about Ricardo Pereira, and I'm going to be doing a player piece on Ricardo Pereira as well on for Fox8.news. To steal a line that I haven't written down, but I believe he's one of maybe only a very small amount in the time of Leicester City. Okay, in the however many years, 1884 all the way through till today. I'm going to do the math straight away, but in all that time, I think there's arguably about 10 players, maybe. I think there might be more. We'll see. And this could be a nice thing to be talking about in the future. I think there might only be about 10 players who you could maybe say was the best player in their position at that current time in the country. And I think Ricardo Pereira is one of those players. I think at his peak at Leicester, and I don't think maybe for 1 or 2 games, you could argue that Kelechi Iheanacho, who had that wonderful 14 goals in 10 games where everything he touched went in, he was the best. He was the most informed player in the Premier League by an awful long way. Was he the best centre forward? No. But I think Ricardo Pereira was the best right back for probably a season and a half. Okay. Trent was right there as well. And maybe just before Pereira, he was probably the best. But I think Ricardo Pereira went to a different level and then got injured. You go back in history, obviously, people like Banks and Shilton probably, arguably, would have been there. It'd be hard to say Lineker, but maybe depends on who the other centre forward, if you're going to play 2. But of course, league winning season, Mahrez, Vardy, they were the best 2 centre forwards, really, or Vardy alongside probably Harry Kane. Them 2 were the best centre forwards by quite a long way. So that's I think Pereira is in that kind of conversation, and that's why he's in the 100 best Leicester players of all time. So look forward to seeing that on for Fox8.news. Any more from you, Tom? We're not going to go deep into the Oxford game. We've been going on for a while now. Final comments from anyone who wants to make a comment, get them in right now. But just to say about Oxford, I would love to see, and we're talking about Pereira, whether he's going to play, I don't think so, because of the amount of time that he played from the game the other day, even though he came on, was it just before half time, wasn't it, Pereira? 41st minute for James. So maybe I'd like to see him in midfield. I'd like to see a lot of bite in midfield, okay? Because against Oxford, I'd love to see Mavididi, Fatawu, and a centre forward like Daka, 3 pacey players. I would love to see them being given the ability to stay forward, okay? And we can have a really solid combative midfield of a Skip, of a Chowdhury maybe, and a Pereira, something like that in midfield, okay? And then have the back line stay solid, stay where you are, don't worry about it, and let our flair players do their stuff out wide, okay? Be solid at the back, and maybe have even a Monga come on a little bit early. Maybe have Page as that further midfielder just behind the centre forward, or a Deco Reed. That's what I would like to see. That's what I think we should have done a long time ago and had more in midfield, more bites. Your thoughts for the Oxford game, again, with the preview coming up on Friday with Rob Hayes?
We're pretty much aligned on this, Pete. The only 2 things I'd like to say, my 2 biggest frustrations at the moment is Luke Thomas. And I don't want to go in on him. I feel like he gets a hard time as it is, and it must suck, to be honest, but that's just part of being a professional player. As long as he's out of the side, I'll be happy though. And Jordan Ayew is just cutting a really frustrating figure for me at the minute. I feel like he's going down way too easily, and I completely agree with your idea of pace. I know Patson Daka is not going to necessarily be the goal scorer that we want him to be, but I think he just at least stays on his feet and can keep their backline occupied enough for us to be able to get in and make some opportunities. So Ayew's technically a great footballer. We've talked about it 1,000 times, but I'm just getting really tired of seeing him drop. It's just frustrating.
Yeah, I don't think you can play Ayew at home at all. I just don't think so. And also, you look at Daka, and we all know what a poor footballer he is. We know he can finish, but we know what a poor player he is. Actually, with the ball at his feet, looking with his back to goal, he can't trap a sandbag. We know that, but he needs to be playing. There's no one else, and I don't like the fact that players aren't played for reasons because they might be moved. I get it. It's the real world. It's not Football Manager. It's the real world. But when it comes to a centre forward, I think that's a little bit off. If you've got a combative midfielder, which Samare apparently is, and we've not really seen it, have we, in his career, or maybe an injury-prone player, then I get it. But if centre forward, what you kind of want him to do is play and score and say, look, sign me if they're wavering. Sign me, score a couple of goals at the weekend and get that move to whoever. But we shall see. That's it for the podcast. Many thanks for listening. Many thanks for watching. You can listen back on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Type in For Fox's Sake, and you can find us on there. Find us on YouTube. Sign up to our YouTube channel. That's completely free. And, of course, it means you'll get a notification for Fox's Sake, for the preview, for the women's football show with Lily, and also, and very importantly, head to forfoxsake.news. Take a look first and see if you fancy any of the articles on there. See if you fancy any of the in-depth dives on. Rob's done some number crunching on Fatawu and Mavadidi, looking at this season to 2 seasons ago. There's loads of different articles. I've mentioned about Marty Cifuentes' first 6 months. There's loads from Andy on there. Andy's unbelievable amount of articles to read. Some fantastic features, some great interviews with former players coming up on there as well. Loads of in-depth content with the Leicester City women's side. So again, if you've got anyone in your family or friends who are, or maybe yourself, of course, who's a big fan of Leicester City women, then make sure you point them in the direction of forfoxsake.news. And remember, it's £5 a month. It's the cost of a pint. And again, what that does, it enables us to bring you these podcasts as well as obviously the website, but it enables these podcasts to be free, and hopefully you're enjoying those. Now, that's it for now. We will be back in a couple of days with the preview with Rob Hayes. So from Tom and myself, keep your chin up, everyone, because we've got Oxford at home. If it goes really wrong against Oxford, we could be having a conversation about the manager and who's going to be in charge in the foreseeable future. But more on that with the preview coming up with Rob in the next couple of days. But for now, up the city and head to forfoxsake.news.